Come in. Dr. Diana Lake here. I am going to be doing our macronutrients talk tonight. So come in. When you come in, say hi. I see a couple of you are on. Say hi. Okay, so I'm going to go on. And basically, when people come on, they can catch the replay if they come on a little later. Hey, Sarah. All right, so we're going to be talking about macros. We're going to be talking about macronutrients. Hey, Marge. All right, so why are we having this conversation? Hey, Sharon. Why are we having this conversation? We're having this conversation because a lot of people struggle with knowing how much to eat to lose weight, right? For some of us, we may not want to lose weight. For some of us, we just want to get toner, right? Stronger. I actually just got off of a free consultation, fitness breakthrough consultation with a physician. We literally just got off the phone, which is why I'm just hopping on here right now. And we were talking about, all of the things that most of us struggle with, right? A lot of us are challenged with nutrition. A lot of us are challenged with losing weight. A lot of us are challenged with finding time to create the meals, with the meal prepping, right? A lot of us are having issues with finding time to exercise, right? Some of us is motivation. Hey, Melissa, for some of us, we have no motivation to make the meals, right? We're tired. So I wanted to talk about macros just so you have a general idea of how it works on a high level, okay? Now, as far as macros is concerned, when I work with people one-on-one, every time we do a one-on-one check-in, we're looking over your macros, right? It's like for the whole time that we're doing the coaching program, even this morning when I did a check-in, we're going over your macros every time. I'm looking over what you're eating, and we're going over everything and seeing if you're staying within, those boundaries, all right? And that's what you want. You want to know the high level. How many grams of carbs should I be eating per day? How many grams of protein should I be eating per day, right? How many grams of fat is okay to have per day? So you want to know those high level numbers, and you can always, kind of deviate from that a little bit. Like say, for example, over the weekend, you'll hear people say, oh, this is my carb heavy weekend, right? I can have a little bit more extra carbs this weekend. But the reason they can do that is because they've made adjustments somewhere else, right? So either you're pulling down the amount of fat that you're eating that weekend to be able to accommodate for the extra carbs you're having, or you're adjusting your protein, right? So let's just go over what are macronutrients, first of all right? So macronutrients are like your three major groups of food that we eat, right? So we basically have our carbohydrates, right? We have our proteins, and we have our fats, okay? So if somebody could just write in the chat, all right? So your three major groups of food, okay? Your macronutrients, macro meaning you can see it with your bare eyes, right? Macro, as opposed to micronutrients, right? Micronutrients are the vitamins and minerals, right? Micronutrients are the things that you cannot, hold on one second, one moment. Let's see here. I'm having some technical difficulties here. Hang on one second. Let's see if this works. Okay. Yeah. So, thanks, Dana. Thanks for putting, Dina. Thanks, Dina, for putting that in. So yes. So basically, you're having, for your three major groups of foods that you're consuming, you've got your carbs, you've got your proteins, and you've got your fats, right? So in general, you want to know how many grams of each of these can I have a day to still be able to, and then lose weight, right? So that's what you want to know. So let's talk about each one. Your carbs, right? So the typical American diet says that you are allowed up to 300 grams of carbs a day, which is a lot, okay? That is a lot. It says you're allowed, and that's for, when you're doing you see on a lot of the labels when you read, it says based on a 2,000 calorie diet or a 2,000 calorie meal plan, right? So when they're doing that 2,000 calorie meal plan, they're basically saying you can have 300 grams of carbs, okay? Every gram of carb gives you 4 calories. All right? So just doing the math, If the typical American diet says you can have 300 grams of carbs, and every gram of carb is giving you 4 calories, it produces 4 calories of energy that you need to burn off when you consume that food. So that's, you do the math, 4 times 300 is 1,200. So they're basically saying 1,200 of your calories should come from carbs, right? And that's pretty high. I mean, there's some people that are having, I'm on like a 1,600 calorie meal plan right now for everything I eat for the whole day. So if I was following this guideline of what is considered normal for an American meal plan, okay, I would be screwed up, because with this 300 grams per day that you're allowed, that would cost me 1,200 calories already. And I'm only doing 1,500 or 1,600 calories for the whole day. So clearly that's not going to work, right? So I'll show you the alternative to that. So let's say for your, fats, okay? For your fats, and I'm going to go through all the different foods, like what's considered a fat, what's considered a protein, what's considered a carb. I'll go through all of that so you know, like examples of each one, okay? But for your fats is a mixed bag, because fats, fish could be considered fat, right? It could potentially be in that category. Anything you're eating with a lot of oil that's fried chicken, and all those things could be in the fats category because of all the saturated fat that's in it, right? It's also going to be in the protein category because it's chicken and fish. It has a high source of protein in it as well. So those things, if it's fried, it's going to kind of fall in both of those categories of your fats and your protein. The other thing that goes into the fat category, in addition to your fish and the fried foods, will be basically, something like avocado. Avocado's got a lot of healthy fat. Nuts, right? Nuts is a healthy fat. That would go into that fats category as well. But remember, these things also have protein. So when you create your meal plan, you have to decide which category you're going to put this food in. And am I going to put it in the protein category, or am I going to put it in the fat category, right? And as you're putting it in one of these apps, like if you're doing like LifeSum or Lose It or MyFitnessPal, or plugging it into any of these things, it'll break it down for you. But in general, in your head, you want to kind of, when you're making your plate, you want to know which category each of these foods is you're putting it in. Because if you look at your plate as a big circle, right, and you're creating that plate, you want to kind of think of, okay, I'm going to have 50% of my plate be veggies, right? So 50% of your plate will have vegetables on it, dark green vegetables, colorful vegetables, whatever. All of it will be on that 50%. So then your protein and carbs is filling that other 50%. So depending on who you are and what type of a meal plan you're on is going to determine how that other 50% of carbs and protein is divvied up, right? So say, for example, someone who, I haven't talked about I've talked about in this group the 3 different body types before. But say, for example, you are an ectomorph, right? Ectomorphs are people who are very slender and have a very, very robust metabolism. Those people, ectomorphs, can have a lot more carbs than your endomorphs, right? So your endomorphs are the people on the other end of the spectrum who have been overweight almost their whole life, right? They have a very slow metabolism and they should be having the least amount of carbs. So they will have a smaller percentage of carbs on their plate compared to the ectomorph, right? I have a mesomorphic body type, right? So I'm mesomorph, which is like the middle. You're kind of in the middle. If you do really well with maintaining your meal plan and exercising, you can stay in the middle. But mesomorphs can go to the endomorph side if they let themselves go. They can gain a lot of weight and they'll end up looking like an endomorph body type, right? So typically when I work with people in my coaching program, I'm doing this with them, right? Your initial assessment that we do, your first day that we get together and have a conversation after you decide to join, that's what we're doing. We're creating your customized meal plan. We're creating your customized fitness plan. We're workout plan, your schedule, literally writing it out, what it's going to look like. So this is a piece of that. I'm just pulling out of that to tell you right now, right? So you make that plate, imagine that imaginary plate, right? Half straight down the middle, 50% is your veggies. The other 50%, depending on, you know, number one, are you doing ketogenic? Are you doing paleo? Are you doing Whole30? There's all these different meal plans out there. Are you doing low carb, right? Depending on what you're doing or what it's, say for example, we're working together and you decide, okay, I want to try a low carb plan. Let's just take low carb, okay, and work with that. If you're doing a low carb plan, what I'm going to tell you is, okay, first we need to determine how many calories you're going to consume per day. Why is that important? It's important because you have a basal metabolic rate, right? Everyone has a basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories it takes your body to function normally without any exercise. The amount of calories your body will burn every day just to be alive, right? Just to be alive and functioning. Your body burns a certain amount of calories, like baseline, okay? That is your basal metabolic rate. So we know that you're gonna burn that anyway, whether you exercise or not, that's gonna happen. So we wanna know what that is. Usually there's a calculation for that. We can figure that out for you, right? And then the next thing, so you wanna know your basal metabolic rate. And then the next thing is, we want to determine how many calories a day you're going to do. We're not going to do the 2,000 calorie a day. Okay, if you're doing low carb, you're not doing 2,000 calorie a day, which is what's recommended in, like the USDA, right? Daily recommendation is the 2,000 calories a day. You're not doing that, right? Because you're trying to lose weight. So the idea is you're going to have a lower consumption, still having a lot of food that's really nutrient dense, but having a lower calorie consumption. And then you're going to increase your exercise and movement and burn more calories so that you get into a calorie deficit, right? That's what you want to do in the weight loss process. You want to be in a calorie deficit, right? You want to be, exerting energy, moving. That's why we want to move. The recommendation to maintain your weight, right, is 30 minutes of moderately intense movement. And I say movement, not exercise, because the movement really could be multiple things. It could be a hike, it could be a walk, it could be tennis, it could be swimming, it could be gardening, it could be mowing the lawn, vacuuming, it could be any movement, right? But you want to have 30 minutes of moderately intense movement 5 days a week, right? That's the recommendation just to maintain the weight you're at now, okay? So if you're looking to lose, then you need to do more than that, yes? So you need to do more than that. And the way you do it is doing this macro, setup that we're going to talk about in conjunction with more movement, more activities, hopefully activities you actually enjoy, right? Like you guys saw, I posted earlier, I went to play tennis. I love tennis. I can play tennis 3 days a week, and I will be happy as a bird. Right? So I love tennis. I love gardening. I picked up a bunch of stuff yesterday from Lowe's. I picked up some stuff from Home Depot today to start my gardening in the front yard, right? That burns calories. Believe it or not, all that digging and moving and I do it pretty vigorously. So you burn calories. So find something that you enjoy doing, right? Whether it's brisk walking, maybe walking with a friend, some kind of thing that you do, or walking with your kids, or riding your bike, or getting on your Peloton, or whatever. You want to find those things to increase your movement, and then you want to really get a handle on your nutrition, okay? So those two things need to be working together. You also want to have all the mindset stuff too, so that you can deal with the cravings and the addiction and the sugar, sugar addiction, salt addiction, desserts and all that stuff. That's the mindset work that needs to be done to be able to manage that. And that's a whole separate conversation. But what you want to do is you want to increase your activity and then do this work on the macros. All right. So let's talk about a low carb macro setup, just theoretically. Okay, so theoretically, let's say you wanted to do a 1,500 calorie meal plan, right? Instead of the 2,000, we did a 1,500 calorie because I do roughly around 1,500 calories. So let's say we were going to do that. How are you going to calculate it? Okay. Now, different apps do them differently, and they'll throw all these percentages out there, which can be confusing. The thing I like to do that is less confusing is just looking at the total number of grams of carbs, the total number of, grams of fat, total number of grams of protein. Okay. And then just put it in there. So let's just say, for example, if you did 150 grams of carbs, all right, and you did 45 grams of fat, and then you did, let's say, 120 grams of protein. Why would I say 120 grams of protein, which is a lot, right? Typically, you figure out your protein, your minimum protein you need for the day. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the number now. I think it's 0.36. I think it's 0.36 grams per pound, right? Your weight in pounds. Somebody can do the calculations. Like say, for example, if you are, say for example, it was 100 pounds, right? If you're 100 pounds, your grams per protein per day would be about 36 grams of protein, right? 0.36 per pound. 0.36 per pound would give you 36 grams for a 100-pound person, okay? So if you're a 200-pound person, I'm just writing it down, then it would be twice that. What is that, 72? Let's see, 12, yeah, right? So 72 grams, right? That's your minimum, okay? So if you're a 200-pound person, 72 grams of protein is kind of like your minimum of what you want to have per day. But if you are someone who's looking to build your muscle, you're someone who's looking to burn fat and tone and sculpt and lean out and build your muscle, then you need more protein than that. If you're 200 pounds, your minimum is 72 grams of protein, you're going to need more than that. That's where I'm getting this 120, right? So if I'm saying I want you to do 120, remember, this is going to differ from person to person, okay? So macros is individualized. You can't just throw numbers out there and then everybody does it. It's from person to person because you're basically, looking at how much you should have minimum and then we're bumping it up, right? So let's say for the fat, I typically tell everyone to keep their fat less than 45 grams, right? Less than 45 grams of fat for the day. And then your carbs, we can go back and forth on that depending on whether you're doing keto, if you're doing keto, your grams of fat would be higher, right? But if you're doing low carb, which is what we're talking about right now, I play around somewhere between 100 to 150 grams of carbs, right? So let's just say, for example, we're doing the math. If you had 150 grams of carbs, right? Someone said, how do you decide how much to bump up in the protein? Okay, good question, Kendra. So you bump up in the protein basically based on, say, for example, you are doing weight training, right? If you're doing weight training, say you're doing 5 sessions of weight training, per week, right? Or you're doing 4 sessions of weight training per week. Your body's really going to need a lot of extra protein, right? You have the regular protein that you're eating normally, but if your goal is to add muscle, if your goal is to build your muscle, then you want to increase your protein. So what you would typically do, say for example, someone is supposed to get 70 grams of protein, right? And we bump them up to 100 grams. If we bump them up to 100 grams of protein, you multiply that by 4 calories, that'll only give them, 400 calories? Right? That'll only give them 400 calories for the day. Okay? So if you did 100 grams of protein, each gram of protein gives you 4 calories. So if you did 100 grams of protein, you multiply that by 4, your total protein calories for the day would be only 400. All right? Then we do all the other ones. Okay? So say, for example, we do the 45. For easy numbers, let's just say 50 grams of fat. It's not going to be 50, but just for me to calculate it easy. If we say 50 grams of fat, okay, each gram of fat gives you 9 calories. All right, so then you kind of have to do the math. And the person, you can do this write it all out and then figure it out for yourself, or you can, obviously get somebody to help you with it. Like I said, people that I work with, that I'm coaching with, we go through this together as we're doing our coaching session. So let's just say, for example, we want to figure out your total calories from fat, right? Each gram of fat gives you 9 calories. There's 9 calories produced by each gram of fat. All right. So you see that, right? Fat requires the most amount of energy to burn off, right? Every gram of fat you consume is giving you 4 calories that you have to burn off. 9 calories you have to burn off, right? Every gram of fat is 9 calories. Every gram of carb is 4 calories. Every gram of protein is 4 calories, right? So proteins and carbs will give you 4 calories per gram. So you want to know that. All right. 1 gram of fat is going to give you 9 calories. So say, for example, you had 50, for easy math, if you had 50 grams of fat, if you consumed 50 grams of fat per day, 50 times 9, that's 450 calories, right? 450 calories. So then if you want to be at 1500, you would say, okay, I'm at 400 for my protein, 450 for my fat. What do I need in my carbs to get me up to 1500? We're back to, we're back to high school, elementary, grade school math here. So basically, to figure out the amount of calories you need coming from carbs, you would just take the 450 plus the 400, that's 950. You subtract that from 1500, which is your total for the day, and that will give you the remaining that goes for your carbs. Okay, so that's the way you would do it. And if that's too high, usually when I look at the numbers, I'm like, okay, I really don't want you doing 200 grams of carbs, right? I want you to do 150 grams of carbs. So if that's what I want a client to do, then I'll start with the carbs. I'll say, let's calculate your carbs at 150 grams. Okay, so 150 times 4, right, will give you the total. What is that? 15 and 15, that's 300? No. 15 and 15 is 30. 15 and 15 is 30, so that's 600, right? Tell me if I'm doing this math correctly, y'all. So if you had 150 grams of carbs per day, each gram giving you 4 calories, my calculation says it would be 600 calories coming from carbs, correct? Yes? Can somebody confirm that? Okay, so if you did 100, it'll be 600, right? So if you did 150 grams times 4, would be 600, right? Exactly, Harkesh. So it'll be 600 calories coming from carbs if you did 150 grams a day. So once you have that 600 from carbs, then you're like, okay, I'm going to do, 45 grams of fat, right? And then you figure out what that number is. So 45 times 9, what's that? Can somebody put it in the chat? What is that, like 405? I think, right? I think that's 405. I want to say it's 405. Just confirm for me, please. Right? So if you have 45 grams of fat, each gram giving you 9 calories, your total fat calories for the day would be 405, correct? Yes? Can somebody confirm that? So then, that's what, to answer your question, Kendra, if you only do 150 grams of carbs and 45 grams of fat, and you have a total now of, what is that, 1005? If you have 1005, is it 1005? Yes, 1005 is your total calories from the carbs and the fat. Then the remaining has to come from protein. So that, wait, you're saying 45 times 9 is 375? Let's see. Let me do the old school math. All right. So 9 times 5 is what? Let's see. We got 5. You carry You carry the 4. 9 times 4 is 32. Right? No, 9 times 4 is 36. It's 405, right? I think it's 405. Yeah, it's 405. Yeah, that's okay. So it was correct. So, all right. So 405. All right. So 45 grams of fat per day will give you 405 calories when you consume it. Okay. So between your carbs at 150 grams and your fat at 45 grams, you will have consumed 1,005 calories. So then that means you have to get the rest of it to get to the 1,500 from your protein, right? You got to get it from your protein. So then what is that? It's going to give you 495, right? So those 495 has to come from your protein for you to get 1,500. Do you see what I'm saying? To get to the 1,500, you have to have 495 calories coming from your protein. And then you just divide this number by 4. It's a lot of math. I know it's probably confusing to some people, but I literally can walk you through this like 101, right? So 495 divided by 4, then that's how you determine what your protein is going to be. Okay. So you can shift this around over and over again. You can say, you know what? I don't want to do 150 grams of carbs. I want to do 180 grams of carbs. And if you still want to stick with your 1,500 calories, then you just move it around. So if you did 180 for your carbs, you would say then 180 times 4, and you would get the answer for that. Then you would keep your fat at 45 grams because you're doing low carb. 45 grams of fat times 9 calories. You get your answer for that. And then the total of those two, you're going to subtract that from 1,500, and that'll give you what you need for your protein. So this is how you calculate the macros to know, okay, at the end of the day, let's just say, for example, in this scenario, at the end of the day, you say, okay, when I plug in my food in MyFitnessPal or LifeSum or Noom or what are some of the other ones? Lose It, any of these apps, right? When you put your food in there and you plug it in and it starts telling you how many grams of fat, how many grams of carbs, how many grams of protein, all you want to do is just tally it up at the end of the day. If you start looking at all those percentages they have in there, you're going to get very confused. So I don't follow all the percentages. It'll be like, oh, take 30% of carb and 30% of fat. And, I don't look at the percentages that they have in those apps. I just plug in the food and see the raw numbers, right? I just plug in the food and I see what the raw numbers are. At the end of the day, after 24 hours, how many grams of carbs have I consumed? How many grams of fat have I consumed? How many grams of protein have I consumed? Okay, that's all I want to know. Keep it simple. Then you take the numbers from what you've entered into the app and you say, okay, for example, I had 200 grams of carbs today. So I'm going to take that 200, multiply it by 4, because I know that every gram of carb gives me 4 calories, right? So if I multiply the 200 by 4, that'll give me 800 calories. So I know that today, when I ate 200 grams of carbs in the foods that I had, I actually consumed 800 calories from carbs. That's how you figure that out. Then you say, okay, I have 45 grams, of fat, right? I have 45 grams of fat. We already did the math for that. That's 405 calories. And then you say, okay, I had 100 grams of protein today. And you put that down. You know that each gram of protein gives you 4 calories. So that'll be 400. So the total for that day, where you had 200 grams of carbs, 45 grams of fat, and 100 grams of protein, when you tally it up, it comes up to what? 800, that's 1,600, 1,605. So for that day, you would have had 1,605 calories consumed. Why is this important? Why do you want to know these numbers? And if you want more clarity on this, let me know. But why do you want to know this? You want to know this because to be in that calorie deficit I talked about before, you want to make sure that what you're consuming, right, the total amount of calories you're consuming, and then the basal metabolic rate, you've got calories that you're burning in general there already, plus the calories that you're exerting in your physical activity throughout the day, you'll end up in the negative. If you're looking to lose weight, you want to end up in the negative, right? You want what you're eating to be less, right, than what you're putting out. Okay, so the energy you're exerting and putting out and the calories you're burning for your body to function normally, when you put those two together, you want that number, the calorie burn for the day, to be higher than the amount of calories you're consuming, right? So what you're putting out needs to be more than what you're putting in. Does that make sense? All right, so that's why doing the macros is helpful, because once you know that, then you can say, okay, I know my cutoff, right? I know at the end of the day, I can only have up to 200 grams of carbs, right? So when you have your protein in the morning or your eggs in the morning and you have your one toast, you look at your toast, you'd be like, okay, how many grams of carbs is in the toast, right? It might be 18 grams, 19 grams in the toast. You add that to your list, right? And then when you go for your lunch, if you have a big carb heavy lunch, maybe you have pasta, or you had quinoa, or you had mashed potatoes or rice, or any of those carbs, you want to see how many grams of carbs is that. If you had a beverage that had a lot of sugar in it, for example, if you had a 20-ounce Sprite, right? The 20-ounce Sprite is going to have 48 grams of sugar, right? So that's about a quarter of your 200 grams of carbs for the day in that one bottle of soda. So think about that. This is why this is important, is now when you know how much your cutoff is for your carbs and what your cutoff is for your fat and what your cutoff is for your protein per day, you start being more mindful of what you're eating. You're like, I can't have this. It's got 50 grams of sugar in it, right? And the sugar is carbs. So if you have a drink, like a Starbucks drink, right? Those Starbucks drinks, a lot of them are very sugary. So if you got your favorite Starbucks drink and it's got 50 grams of sugar in it, that's a quarter of all the carbs you can have for the whole day in that one drink. Okay? So it starts, the light bulb starts going off that I really have to be mindful of what I'm eating, because certain things are going to be very carb heavy. And if I want to stay within my macros, I cannot do that. Or maybe I'll only have a third of it, right? So then you start making those mindful decisions about what you're eating. If you are a vegetarian, this is even more challenging, because for vegetarian, a lot of what they eat has carbs, right? A lot of what they eat has carbs. The pasta, the breads, a lot of the stuff they're having has carbs. So they have to really make an effort to make sure that they're not going too overboard with the carbs, right? And then have really unique ways, creative ways to get protein into their meal plan, right? Because if you're trying to get 120 grams of protein, that's a lot of protein. All right, that's a lot of protein. So let me just go over that right now so we can wrap it up. So the sources of each of these, okay? The sources of carbs, the sources of fat, the sources of protein. So let's go over the carbs for a moment. Where do you get your sugar, right? Where do you get your carbs? You would get carbs from all your baked goods. All your baked goods are going to be carb heavy. Your rice, your quinoa, your oatmeal, your potatoes of any kind, your yams, your cassava, or some people call it yucca. Like all those tubers, all the underground stuff, potatoes, all of those will be carb heavy, right? There are some fruits that are also carb heavy, right? Sometimes people don't think of fruits and carbs in the same sentence, but yes, like your mangoes are very sugary, right? So if you do mangoes, they have a lot of sugar, so it's gonna be high on your carbs list. What else? Your peaches, right? It's gonna be pretty sugary. Grapes have a decent amount of sugar too. The fruits that are really low glycemic, the fruits that have really low sugar content would be your berries. So raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, acai berries, goji berries, like all, blackberries, all of those will have really low sugar content. So the carbs in them will be low. So those are the fruits, if you're looking to lose weight, you want to stick with. Apples is kind of a little bit in the middle, but it still works. You can do apples, right? Pineapples are sugary, right? So some of them are sugary. You can still have them, but you want to have them just once in a while. Okay, so let's see what else for carbs. So for carbs, we talked about all the baked goods, sugary drinks. Big source of carbs is sugary drinks. Okay, sodas, alcohol. Alcohol is another one. Alcohol, for every gram of alcohol, you get 7 calories. Okay, so alcohol, you're gonna get a lot of carbs from it. So if you're doing alcohol, a lot of it, that's why you have a beer belly, right? Because a lot of that extra carb is not being worked off and it's going into abdominal fat, okay? So alcohol, sugary drinks, desserts are sugary, right? All of those are going to be carbs, okay? And then the healthy carbs will be things like, your quinoa, your sweet potato, your oatmeal, your brown rice, right? Brown rice is going to give you fiber. The white rice typically doesn't have fiber, right? So you want to know what type of carbs you want to consume, which ones are considered, the ones that are more complex carbs that will sit on your stomach and give you that early satiety where you actually feel full longer and you're not going within an hour hungry again. Because if you do the processed foods and you do the simple sugars, you're going to be hungry again very quickly. And that is like that vicious cycle. It keeps triggering your brain reward system and you keep wanting to go back for more, like an addiction, right? So you want to do complex carbs to make up that 150 grams if that's what you're doing per day. One more thing about carbs. You want to know which veggies, there's some veggies that are carb heavy, okay? Corn, peas, right? Corn and peas are pretty heavy in carbs. Beans, right? The beans, you'll have carbs and protein for the beans. The beans, you can kind of put it in a carb category or you can put it in the protein category, all the pulses, right? So you really want to choose when you're putting it on your plate. Am I putting this on my plate as a carb or am I putting this on my plate as a protein? You want to make that decision. So those are your typical carbs. So you want to know veggies wise, the low carb veggies are pretty much like your dark leafy vegetables, right? Or your dark green vegetables, like your broccoli, your spinach, your, arugula, romaine lettuce, kale, all of those will be pretty low carb. Cauliflower, pretty low carb. Okay, so if you're putting 50% veggies on your plate, you want them to be like the low carb veggies. If you put corn on your plate, I typically consider corn a carb because it's high in carbs. So if I put corn on my plate, I don't consider it a veggie. I consider it part of my carbs for the plate. Okay, so that's and peas. Carrots are kind of in the middle. They have a higher carbs content. So carrots, you can look it up and see the for like half a cup or a cup and see how many grams of carbs is in there. But the big ones are going to be that you want to be mindful of for the veggies is the corn, the beans, and the peas. Those are going to be high carb veggies. Okay, and then all your dark leafy stuff are pretty low carb. The carbs in them is like almost negligible, right? So that's why you want to have a lot of that on your plate. So you get that volume of veggies in your belly. It makes you feel full longer. It takes longer for your body to break down. It sweeps out your colon, right? It goes into all those diverticulum, like all those little pockets of stool sitting in there. All the veggies will sweep all of that out. That's your natural cleanser. So have more veggies. Okay, it's low calorie. It cleans out your colon naturally. It keeps you regular. Okay, you can't go wrong with the veggies. So that's carbs. Then let's talk about fats. What would be considered fats? A lot of your processed foods are going to end up in the fat category. A lot of your processed foods. Jessica said, can I watch this tonight? Yes, you can. It's going to be saved, so you can just hit the replay. So for the fats, anything processed is most likely going to have a good amount of fat, right? Your saturated fat is especially what you're looking for, right? You want to look for how much of the total fat content is in the food, and then the saturated fat. So a lot of the fried foods and processed foods are going to be in this fat category. Healthy fats. What are your healthy fats that would be in this category? Healthy fats would be like your nuts, your avocado, your fish, right? So your salmon, your sea bass, your halibut, all the different, fish will be in that healthy fat category, right? It can also be considered a protein. So the fish can be healthy fat with the omega-3 acids, right? And if you're doing, what do you call it? If you're doing like a Mediterranean diet, right, you're going to have quite a bit of protein because you might be doing a lot of fish. And so basically in those meal plans, you can kind of decide where you want the food to go. Do you want to consider it a fat, or do you want to consider it a protein? Okay, so those are your typical healthy fats, and then all the oils, right? Your olive oil, hemp oil, coconut oil, what else? All of those oils would be in the fat category. Okay, let me see if I'm forgetting anything when it comes to the fats. That's all I can think of right now for the fats. And then, I forgot for the fruits, bananas. Bananas has a pretty high carb content. So going back to the fruits, they just popped in my head. You want to put the bananas in your high carb category. You can still have it, but you need to know in the grand scheme of fruits, as far as fruits go, your mangoes, your bananas, your peaches, your pineapples, like all of those are going to be the higher carb, and then your berries will be the lower carb. Okay, I forgot that. It just popped in my head. Okay, and then for your protein. So for the protein, again, fish would be considered protein. Chicken would be considered protein. Turkey would be considered protein. All your meats, right? So your beef, your bison, your rabbit. I ate rabbit when I went to France. I don't know how many people are eating rabbit every day, but your rabbit, like all the animal meats, right, would be your protein. Eggs, right? Eggs is your protein and a healthy fat, right? Eggs could be a healthy fat and protein, okay? Again, as I said, avocado is also in both categories. It's a protein and it's a healthy fat. All your beans, your pulses, your legumes, right? All of those will be carbs or protein. They have a good source of both. Okay, so you just want to know what food categories, what food items fall in the different categories. So when you're making your list, you can know what you're consuming. Okay, let's see what else I wanted to say about protein. Oh, saturated fat and protein. You really want your protein meats to be lean. If you can get them grass-fed, like grass-fed beef, grass-fed, like bison and all that stuff, that would be awesome. If you want to get chicken, make sure your chicken is veggie-fed chicken, right? Farm-raised veggie-fed chicken. You just don't want the ones, with all the antibiotics added and growth hormones added and, like all this stuff they give them to make them grow in these horrible conditions, right? So you want it to be veggie-fed, and you want it to be, for the fish, you want the fish to be wild caught, right? Wild caught as opposed to farmed, right? So your wild caught fish is the fisherman goes out into the wild and they catch it in its natural environment, right? Again, those will not have all of the antibiotics, the steroids, and all of those pre-treatments that the farm fish is going to have, right? And also your wild caught fish is going to have a lot more natural antioxidants and omega-3 acid in it and all of that, right? Your wild caught fish is going to be a lot more nutrient dense than your farmed fish. So that's just the last thing I wanted to mention was whatever the food source is, make sure it's as close to the earth as possible, okay? And not processed. And what else? Oh, carbs. know that your meats are typically not going to have carbs in them, right? Carbs only come typically from your starchy foods and your plants, okay? Your steak is not going to have carbs in it. Your chicken, your shrimp, your fish. So the animal products typically don't have carbs in them, okay? So you're only getting the carbs from the sugary foods, the starchy foods, and your veggies. That's another takeaway. All right, so I think that's all I wanted to say for this. If anyone wants me to do the calculations in the comment section, just say, hey, can you do a calculation for if I wanted to do 150 grams of carbs, what should my fat and protein look like? You know what I mean? If I want to be on a 1,500 calorie meal plan. If I want to do 200 grams of carbs, what should my protein and fat look like if I'm doing a 1,500 calorie meal plan? That's the question you want to be asking so that you know how to do the calculations. But I say 1,600 calories is really a good place to be if you're looking to lose weight. I have some people who go as low as 1,200 calories, which I think is a little too low. I like 1,500 to 1,600 calories. I think that's sustainable. I'm definitely not doing 2,000 calories. Okay. The question, let's see, Fatima says, logged in late. How can we watch this later? As soon as I'm done with this, and I'm pretty much done right now, I'm going to hit finish and I'm going to share it, and it's going to be, you'll be able to replay. So it's going to be saved in here and you can replay. Let's see, somebody, Lima says, what should macros be on a 1,200 calorie diet? Okay, so the 1,200 calorie, like I was saying, on average, you want to look at your total carbs. So say, for example, I don't know the numbers in my head, but if you did, say, for example, 110 grams of carbs, you times that by 4 calories, that'll give you what? Let me just do the math real quick. 110 grams of carbs times 4, what is that, 440? That'll give you 440 calories. And then if you did 45 grams of fat, that'll give you 405 calories. And then you can figure out that third one. Okay? So 1,200, the total of these two is what? 110 grams of carbs is 440 calories. 45 grams of fat is 405. The total of that is 845. So then you would just subtract 1,200 minus 845. That'll give you the total amount of calories you need for the protein. And that's how you would determine your grams of protein. Okay? So it's really just knowing the three and then determining what your total calories should be for the day, and then, figuring out the numbers. Send me a direct message if you have a number in your head, or post it in a group, even better. If you post it in a group and tag me, then everybody can see it. Because if you have that question, most likely somebody else has that question too, right? And so basically that's how you would do it, okay? Do your carbs, do your fat. In general, I'm keeping the fat around 40 to 45 grams, unless you're doing a ketogenic meal plan. Then that number would be much higher. And then your carb number would be like 50 grams, right? So for ketogenic, the numbers are completely different. What we were doing here was for a low carb meal plan, okay? This could also work for a paleo meal plan. It could work for a Whole30 meal plan. You would just have to make the choices of, what your carb is and what your, like if you were doing paleo, your carbs will not have any grains in them, right? You can just choose what your carbs are going to be, just no grains, right? No corn, no rice, no quinoa, like all that. But you can have like sweet potato, Yukon potato, like stuff like that. So you can create the meal plan and then, go through the three categories of carbs, fat, and protein. All right. But like I said, for ketogenic, it's different. Okay, because the ratios are completely different. Your fat is going to be much higher and your carbs is going to be much lower. So you figure out those two, and then the difference will give you your protein. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you for tonight. If it's too much, you have a specific question, tag me and I'll do my best to answer it. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Dr. Diana Lake. I'm the creator of this group. I'm an ER doc. I am a fitness and weight loss coach. I'm also a menopause wellness expert, and I help women go from feeling drained, exhausted, overwhelmed to fit, fierce and fabulous. Okay, that's it. All right, I'll see you guys later. It was very informative. You're welcome, Aisha. All right, guys, have a good night. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.